wasting away every single day. We want to get rid of those people. We want to get rid of the Oscar Mabuyanes and the Cyril Ramaphosas of this world. And or Ace Abba, even worse. They must go. Or Willem Kiese, Abba Lamasela, they must all go.
Today we're sitting with Mr. Athol Trollip. He served as a councillor in the Matola District Council, a leader of the opposition in the Eastern Cape Provincial Legislature, leader of the opposition in the National Assembly, provincial leader of the DA, national chairperson of the DA, mayor in Nelson Mandela Bay. You've got a long list of things, of credible things that you have done in your life. And the first time I spoke to you, I'm not sure if you'll remember, but I was actually looking at my emails and looking at the first email I sent to you was in 2015. I was a student at Nelson Mandela Bay, and I don't know what I was saying or what I was complaining about, but you actually responded, which was to me, it meant, or it showed me that you are an accessible person, of which most politicians that I know, it becomes very, very difficult to get a hold of them. So thank you so much for sitting down with us. Maybe let's start with your background. I mean, your story is very familiar with South Africans. The people of this country know who you are. But maybe for those that live under a certain rock that don't know, let's take it way back to where you grew up and how your upbringing was, and maybe where that political bug bit you for the first time.
Yeah, Luphumlo, thanks very much. Let me, in fact, it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention the fact that you are the ultimate adapter. We were supposed to be having an interview at a Heritage Day event that we were having, and you arrived, you set up a table with your microphones, and just then, as we were supposed to start at 12, and you arrived before 12, which I really respect, at 12 o'clock the power went off.
Yeah.
So I'm dressed like this because today is Heritage Day. And I think you've shown incredible innovation to come here to the Pallet Doctor and to conduct an interview in the street. And I think this is what South Africa needs. I mean, the Pallet Doctor himself, his life was taken by this terrible, violent crime wave that's engulfing this country. He was the ultimate adapter, and he was an entrepreneur. He made the most out of what he had.
Yeah.
And I think this interview right here on Heritage Day is inspirational for me. To answer your question, I grew up on a small farm in Bedford. It was a family farm. I come from 1820 settler stock. My family arrived on that farm in 1826 and bought it. And I was the sixth generation born on that farm. Roland Athol Price is my grandfather's name. I have my grandfather's name. I also followed in my grandfather's footsteps. He was studying law, and his two older brothers were killed in the First World War. So he wasn't able to complete his law studies. He had to come back and farm on the farm.
Yeah.
But he always obviously wanted a little bit more than farming. He was a very, very good farmer, a conservationist, and a very successful farmer. But he ended up in politics. He was a member of the United Party. He represented PE Central, that constituency. So I grew up in a politically orientated home, opposition orientated, in opposition to apartheid.
Yeah.
So I grew up in that environment. Obviously, I was involved in student politics, and then I went back to farm. That was my real passion, and I got involved in serving my community, which inevitably led me into politics. So I'm also now a politician. I was out of politics for 2 years after I resigned from the DA. And I was very happily out of politics. I was working with black citrus commercial farmers in Nkonkobe and Ngushwa municipality, and I was loving that because farming is my real passion.
Yeah.
But it still brought me closer to the reality that rural poverty in this province is causing so many social troubles because people leave their rural homes and they seek greener pastures in the city and they don't find any, and they end up living in a twilight zone in informal settlements with no service delivery. And it's a really terrible, tough life. And that's what motivated me to get back into politics. Herman Mashaba asked me to help him fix South Africa and to fix the Eastern Cape. And I said to Herman, I've had enough. And he looked at me and he said, have you done enough? Well, that question floored me because the Eastern Cape's a mess, and that's why I'm back in politics.
That's amazing. I actually listened to there's a video of you speaking at
Business News.
Business News, yes. And for me, that was very, very interesting. It articulated your journey, and I would recommend people to go out there and look at that video if you want to know more about Mr. Athol Trollip. Maybe taking it back to the past 3 years or so. On Twitter, I follow you, and I've seen on your Twitter banner, it says Athol Trollip Consulting. Can you talk to us more about some of the the
so
business?
that was so interesting, because I got to a point, and I had a 38-year association and relationship with the DA. So I can't badmouth the DA. It was the most part of my life I was involved in the DA and the DP and the PFP. But I got to a point where I felt that the DA was going in a direction that I couldn't reconcile with. And I've always regarded myself as a conviction politician rather than a career politician. So when it looked like the party, wanted to get rid of Maimane, who was our first black leader, and I thought that was grossly unfair because a poor election wasn't only attributable to him. There were many, many reasons, and I know them. I was the chairperson of the party. So I decided, after 2 or 3 days of agonizing, that I was going to resign from the Democratic Alliance. It was a very traumatic decision. And I really didn't know what I was going to do the next day. But I sat down and I thought about it, and I realized that I had many years of experience in how government works or doesn't work. I knew so many people whose doors I could knock on, and I believed that I could be a bridge builder between the private sector and the public sector.
Yeah.
So I started a consultancy business, and I was very fortunate. I got some contracts, and people wanted me to fix things like, zoning applications that were blocked somewhere in Pretoria, or title deeds that were supposed to be transferred that hadn't been transferred, those kind of things. And then I was contracted by a citrus exporting company, South African Fruit Promoters, to help their black citrus growers who were having a lot of problems with funding issues, title deed issues, and production issues. And I worked for them on a contract for about 6 months, and then they employed me full-time for a year until Herman Mashaba came knocking on my door, and I really didn't expect to be back in politics. But it's exciting, this time around. I spent my life trying to tell people that you can change your mind in politics. And I was trying to convince them to change their minds. And when I changed my mind, I felt liberated.
Change their minds about what?
About politics, So politics is the art of convincing people to change their mind, from voting for the ANC to voting for ActionSA. That's the art of politics. And I thought about it for a long time, and I thought, Herman Mashaba now wants me to join him. I never ever thought I'd been in another political party. And I changed my mind, and I do belong to another political party, and I feel liberated by that decision because I've got a mind, and I changed my mind. I believe this is a better vehicle. It's more appropriate for South Africa where we are now. And what I really like about it, you were at the event where we were holding and paying respect to Heritage Day. It feels like a South African party, for all people. Just feels comfortable, and that's what excites me about what's happening in ActionSA right now.
I just want to double click on your business, because so part of my work is with all sorts of entrepreneurs across the Eastern Cape that want to break this curse of poverty. There must have been a few lessons that you've learned. Was that actually your first business ever that you've started on your own, or is there like I know that you are into farming, but have you ever actually started a business prior to this? And maybe what were some of the key lessons that you've learned that you would pass down to other young entrepreneurs that are starting businesses across the Eastern Cape, particularly the Eastern Cape?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I spent most of my life being a farmer. I inherited a family business. So it was a legacy business that I took over. Obviously, the objective was to try and improve it. And then I also, when I was a young farmer, in order to make ends meet, I had a young growing family. I also worked for a livestock marketing company. So I've worked for other people before. I haven't just worked only for myself. First I worked for my father, then I worked for a livestock marketing company, then I was involved in local government, but I'd never started a business from scratch.
Okay.
And I can understand why young entrepreneurs feel so scared about it, because you don't know whether anybody's going to contract you, first of all. So you don't know whether you're going to have any income in the first month or 2 or 3 or 4. But any advice I can give you is that you must project yourself positively. If you believe that you've got a product that people want and you project yourself positively and you can convey that confidence to people, they will give you a chance. I experienced South Africans giving me a chance. And I remember I said something quite controversial on the day that I resigned. I said that I don't know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow, but I know that it's going to be difficult as a 50-something-year-old white
South.
man.
I heard that.
And, and a lot of people thought, that it was a weird thing to say, but it was the reality.
Yeah.
It was who I was and where I was at the time.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be really difficult. I thought that would be a barrier to entry into starting something new.
But I mean, people know you. People know Athol Trollip.
But just like a young black South African, he might believe that his barrier into entry is his youth or the fact that he doesn't have experience. You always have bogeymen in your mind. You think, I'm either too old or I'm too young, and maybe I've got too much experience and maybe I've got too little experience. These are thoughts that go through people's minds, and you've got to just try and synthesize the noise and decide what it is you're going to do, and then go to people and say, listen, I'm going to be a pallet doctor and I'm going to turn this place into something really nice and make it a place of recreation, and then go for it and sell it. And this young man did that. So I was just trying to be really frank and honest with you to say I was in a place where, I had commitments, I had a family, I had a bond, I had all sorts of things to do, and today I have a job that I voluntarily resigned from, and I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow to meet those commitments. So it was a scary place. I just applied myself really hard, and I put out my CV and I put it out to my connections, and luckily 1 or 2 people said, no, I know this guy. I think
really? So you went on and did your own CV and
everything.
Really?
My daughter-in-law put a CV together for me because she could do it, beautifully, much better than I can, and I put out my CV. And that's how I started. It's as simple as that.
Wow.
I was like any other person starting their own business.
Wow. One of the things I wanted to chat to you about was your religious views. I've watched quite a lot of your interviews, and I've seen you around. I was in Nelson Mandela Bay when you were the mayor. I've actually never heard you express what your beliefs are or anything like that. Maybe you have, but
I'm surprised. I thought you were going to say, look, I do not hide my religious beliefs under any bushel. I'm a committed Christian. I believe in God. I'm married to a really devout Christian wife who is who gives Christian direction in our family. An extraordinary woman of faith. I respect deeply that there are people of other faiths in this country that pray to different gods. I also respect that we are one of the most diverse nations in the world. So I am unashamedly Christian, but I have as much respect for a Jew or a Muslim or any other Christian of any other denomination. I grew up in an Anglican family. I used to be a Christian that went to church now and again. And now I'm
now and again.
Yeah. And now I'm a born-again Christian that goes to church whenever I can. And it gives me backup.
Yeah.
My faith gives me huge backup. And I'm also very careful, though, that not to force my religious convictions onto anybody. I hope that they will be inspire people, because I think in life you reflect who you are as a person, not what you say, through what you do rather than what you say. And I believe that my religious conviction informs who I am and what I do, and hopefully that will rub off on other people. But as I said, we live under the South African flag, where we have a constitution with a Bill of Rights that makes provisions for people of all persuasions in this country, and I respect that. I respect and revere our constitution enormously, but I respect God more than anybody.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing and very inspirational. So I think you were talking about the moment when Herman Mashaba sort of spoke to you and asked you that question, which came out in the talk that you gave at Biz News. That have you done enough? I'm sure the conversation you had with your family after that conversation you had with Herman wasn't so nice.
You know, being a politician is a tough business, not just for me. It's a tough business for one's family.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a politician, you do so because you want to do it and you can never complain about it, but your family takes a lot of strain. My kids, for example, I was an absent father for a lot of their life, especially going through school. I missed a lot of activities because of political responsibility. And it takes its toll on one's family, but my wife enjoyed me being out of politics. But she was the very first person to say to me, this is your real passion.
Wow.
And if this is what you want to do, I'll support you. It's tough, though. I'll give you a classic illustration. Today is Heritage Day. My mother died a year ago on Heritage Day.
Sure.
My wife's mother died 2 nights ago.
Sure.
She's at home alone now. I went home last night, spent the night with her. I came back here because this is my job and I must do it. So it has extraordinary consequences for people who support you back home. But she was the first person to say, this is what your destiny is, so I'll support you. So that was amazing. But also when Herman Mashaba, apart from taking the wind out of my sails with that have you done enough thing, I flew back on the flight that day and I thought to myself, what a profound question, because our province is a mess.
Yeah.
And clearly I haven't done enough in the province. But here's a guy who's made a fortune through hard work, through the toughest time during apartheid. He could just be enjoying the fruit of his labor with his family. And what is he doing? He's sacrificing his family life. He's never at home. I've heard him saying it's the most brutal business he's ever been in. Never at home. Putting his hand in his own pocket to take his own money out that he's worked for with his family and family who are still working for it, to put it into politics. And I thought, no, man, if this guy's doing this, how can I turn him down?
Yeah.
So when I got home, I said to my family, I'm going to do it again. I think my kids thought I'm mad.
I can imagine.
I really do think they're mad. But, you know, they're adults now and they've got their own lives. And I heard one of my friends asking my son last week, he said, are you going to go into politics? And he said, no ways. But it's amazing. He's got strong political opinions. I watch him on Twitter as well, very strong political opinions. But, yeah, he'll never be a politician.
Wow, man. Wow. Sure. Because I was asking, because I think, you know, the risks that politicians take, those politicians that are married, eventually it should take a toll on your family and your kids and all of that. One of the things I wanted to ask on that question was, in fact, maybe let's look at today's Heritage Day in Soweto. Mmusi Maimane is launching a new party, which I'm sure you've heard of. Has he called you to say anything? You know?
Look, Mmusi and I were, close colleagues for a long, long time. He was my leader in the Democratic Alliance. We resigned on the same day.
Yeah.
I think for slightly different reasons, but I supported the fact that he wasn't solely to blame for a bad election. And here's the irony. The DA exacted Mmusi's resignation because the party went back 1.3%. 2 years later, they went back more under the current leadership. They lost 10% in Nelson Mandela Bay. We went from 37 to 47% when I was the mayoral candidate. And then 2 years later, after Mmusi resigned, they lost that 10%. They lost 360 odd council seats across the country. They lost 8 municipalities. Nobody said that they must resign or fall on their sword. So I found that hugely ironic.
So do you think he was being forced out?
I don't think he was. He was forced out. There was a review panel and they basically said,
why?
He didn't perform well enough, he must go. So, Mmusi, we talk every now and again. He had a blog and he asked me to come on his blog just after the last elections to do a talk for about 45 minutes, which I was happy to do. I think he's got a role to play in South African politics. I don't know whether the path he's chosen is going to be very effective. He aligned himself to independent councillors for the last election, and now he says that he sees that the road to independent candidates in the next election is going to be more difficult than he thought. So he's starting a new political movement. I'm not exactly sure what he's going to do. But, I was saddened initially that Herman and Mmusi didn't do something together.
Yeah.
They did try, I think, and they just couldn't find common ground, and that happens.
Do you know why?
No, I'm not exactly sure why. But I just don't think it was a fit at the time for both of them. Herman wrote a book about being an accidental mayor.
Yeah.
He's not really a politician. He's just a businessman who's concerned about South Africa, who wants to try and make a difference, and he's one of the most pragmatic people I know. So he's applying his pragmatism to try and solve the problems of South Africa. Whereas Mmusi is much more politically inclined, I think more ideologically driven.
Yeah.
And our paths will probably cross again in the future. I think that coalitions are going to be the thing in this country for a long time. And, we're not really good at coalitions just yet, but you only gain experience by doing things. So at the moment we're doing coalitions. We're learning to cooperate and collaborate and put egos aside and find the big picture and to govern properly. So I think coalitions are going to be with us for a long time to come, and the more we do it, the better we'll be at it.
Wow. Because I was actually just about to say that in case study number 1, Nelson Mandela Bay, there's literally like a new mayor, I don't know, every 2-3 years.
Well, much more frequent than that. It's become a revolving door of mayors. It really has been a real joke, and the city is the worst for it. I think there's a very good reason why you have a term of office for about, in most countries, between 4 to 5 years. South Africa is 5 years. Because I think in 5 years you can turn something around. But I know that in Nelson Mandela Bay, things can turn around quickly. When I became the mayor, we went from being the second worst metro city to the second best in 1 year. So change can come quickly.
So what did you do?
Well, we just applied the laws properly, and we ran the city like a business. We separated the politics from the administration. I used the metaphor of train tracks. Train tracks are perfectly parallel for a very good reason, because they bolted with sleepers and they kept like that, because if they come together, you have a derailment, the train falls over, and if they come apart, the train falls over. So the big challenge is to make sure that politics doesn't get into the administration or vice versa, because that's when tender corruption takes place, and fraud and corruption. And if they go too far apart where the administration is lost by the politics and the politics has lost the confidence of the administrators, you also have a derailment. So the big challenge is just to do things properly. When I became the mayor, I was like the proverbial Jack Russell that caught the bus, because I'd spent most of my life in opposition, telling people about what I would do if I got into government. And then I found myself in a position where I had to do something in government. And then I came up with that metaphor, and I went and sold it to the administrators and to the politicians. And I said, we're going to keep these things separate. There's a constitutional provision of separation of powers for a very good reason. I made a commitment to the electorate that I would stop corruption. Stop corruption, not slow it down or to try and, I said I would stop corruption. And when my deputy mayor was corrupt, I tried everything to deal with it. The UDM and the DA wouldn't deal with Mongameli Bobani. I couldn't remove him as the deputy mayor because he was elected to that position by council. But I fired him as the mayoral committee member for public health. And I knew that would probably precipitate him aligning with the ANC and the EFF.
Which is what happened.
To get me kicked out. And that's exactly what happened a year later. But you know what? If you have principles and you make commitments in life, you must stick by those commitments and those principles, even if it means you must lose power. I think it has taught people a lot of lessons. And even this collapse of this coalition of corruption now is because people like Kuster Jack and his party AIM and a lot of the others that were in a coalition with the ANC in this city came quickly to realize that their electorate were going to punish them for aligning with the ANC. I remember Kuster Jack saying, "Sawakupa la masela," and all of this kind of thing. The next minute he was a mayoral committee member with the ANC. He quickly realized that the people of the city didn't want more ANC. They want less ANC. They want a new government. So
but surely if the people of the city want less ANC, then they should reflect that in the ballot boxes when they vote.
Well, they did, because, the ANC in 2016, before 2016, had 51%. They went down to 41%. And in the last election, they went to 37%. So the people don't want the ANC. But what has happened is that the people are also voting for various other political parties. They for one reason or another don't want to just vote for one other party that will replace. So people are now feeling their way, and there's some strength to that, because that's the essence of democracy, but there are weaknesses too, because I fear what's happening in South African politics is that we're getting what I call enclave politics, where you get political parties that are racial national parties. So you get a colored party, you get a Zulu ethnic party, you get a Afrikaans-speaking Freedom Front Plus party, you get black parties, you have white parties. And those are all enclaves. And between the enclaves, they point fingers at each other. This one's racist, and this one's that, and this one's corrupt, and this one's a Gucci revolutionary, and Bayolatan.
Yeah.
And that's very puerile politics. Always blaming somebody else for your own failures. So I think what South Africans are starting to do, they're starting to understand that they have power in their votes. And at the moment, they're just spreading that power around a bit. But I think they will start to realizing that if they put that power together properly, that they can actually get a completely different government. And I think the next 5 to 10 to 20 years in South Africa are going to be amazing.
I wanted to talk more today about ActionSA and your role in the future of the country, particularly your role as an activist, a person that's on the ground in the Eastern Cape. You earlier said that there's so much wrong, or there's so many wrong things in the Eastern Cape. And I'm sure most of us know of some of those things, but from where you're sitting and from your eyes, what's going wrong in the Eastern Cape, and what is ActionSA going to do about it?
Well, look, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Eastern Cape is the worst run province, and the fact that the ANC has the highest majority in this province. I think those things go hand in hand. So I think hegemonic government is really bad for South Africa. We had 48 years of national party domination, one party domination, where the country went through some of the most traumatic times. And we've just had 28 years of ANC domination, also a nationalist organization. And I think that South Africans are wanting to spread that around a little bit and prevent hegemonic domination of one party.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. My job in ActionSA, I made a commitment to Herman Mashaba. I said I'd give him 2 years as the provincial chairperson of ActionSA. I would go and build structures. I've done it before. I'm not young anymore, but I've still got the enthusiasm to do it. So we're building structures throughout the province. The very first branch that I launched was in Ngobo,
Oh, wow.
followed by Bizana the next week. So we've got branches in the deep rural areas, we've got branches in metro cities, and we're launching branches all the time. We're about to launch one in Koja in the next 2 weeks. And next Sunday, I'm going to a place called Sweetwaters in King Williamstown to
I know
launch.
Sweetwaters.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Do you just, is it people that inbox you and say, come and launch a branch? Or?
Yeah, so what happens is that, we've got coordinators, provincial coordinators, 2 of them, and then regional coordinators in the district municipal regions. And we're very strong on social media. So people will contact us on social media and we'll put them in touch with a coordinator. They will get recruited, and if they're enthusiastic, they can start recruiting people on their own. And Ngobo has been like a revelation for me because it's deep in the rural areas. They register people online. When I went to launch the branch, they never asked for anything. And when I got there, en route, I bought a small little chocolate cake from Spa. I thought I'm going to take this cake. It's going to be a ceremonial cake. It is the birthday of ActionSA in the Eastern Cape. Yo, figure kwampandi, figure cake ngaka. Yeah, they draped this hall. They had this massive cake like this with ActionSA birthday.
That's amazing, man.
Hey, man, and then afterwards we had chicken and rice, and I left there and nobody asked me for anything.
That's amazing.
So it was like complete ownership of what they were doing.
Yeah.
I've never experienced that before. In the It really has motivated me to do so much more. So even this vehicle behind me,
Yeah.
life's about stories, and I like to keep things simple and tell stories. So our chairperson asked me if I could, contact one of my business contacts and see if we could get a vehicle for him and Mashaba. Because this guy spends his life traveling around and, he's got to work and he have a laptop and all this kind of thing. So I contacted a business and they agreed. They said they'd sponsor the vehicle for 2 years. until the next election. And I phoned Herman and I said, Herman, I've got your vehicle sorted. I was so proud that I'd got him a vehicle. And he said to me, no, Athol, I don't want that vehicle. I've got my own vehicle. You must use it in the Eastern Cape. You use it. You need it more than I do. And I was so humbled by that guy's attitude, because it was actually for him. But he realized that if we have a vehicle like this and people can see ActionSA wherever we go, and they're recognizable faces on the vehicle, and they can see, and there's a snap scan there to join the party and to donate.
Oh, I didn't see that.
There have been many inspirational things. So my promise to Herman was 2 years until the 2024 election as the provincial chairperson. And by then I must have identified somebody who can take over from me to be the provincial chairperson. And I said, if we get some people elected to Parliament, I have years of experience in Parliament. I'm prepared to share that experience in a backup kind of position. I don't want to be the leader of ActionSA. I didn't want to be the leader of the DA. I just prefer being from the Eastern Cape, helping the people of the Eastern Cape to improve our lot. I love this province. I love this country, but I love this province much, much more. It's more special to me. It means much more to me than anything else. So my real role in politics is to make sure that we can improve life here in the Eastern Cape.
So have you got no ambitions of becoming a president of this country or something like that?
No, I don't have any ambition of becoming a president of the country. I think there are many more suitable people. I think my real strength is in a backup position, background work. I believe I've built up a reputation in politics that is, a brand, and I can make that work for my political party. And I'm prepared to do anything for my country, but I think there are people that are eminently more suitable to be the president of South Africa. I've had my time in leadership in the DA in many, many roles, and I'm prepared now to just be part of the team, a backup team, not to play off the bench. I'm not an impact player. I want to play, but I want to play every day in a backup role.
I've always wanted to know, for instance, you're the first provincial chairperson of ActionSA. Do you get paid for that? Does it come from your pocket? You traveling around, going to places?
Yeah, so I wasn't the first. The first, I suppose, was John Moody, because, it was
ActionSA?
Yeah, ActionSA in Gauteng, because ActionSA was there first in Gauteng. And then there was Makosi Khoza.
Oh, the first of the Eastern Cape.
First of the Eastern Cape, yeah. So, but I was the fourth provincial leader in the country. So it was John Moody, Makosi Khoza in KZN, Faiki Mentor in the Western Cape, and then myself. So, they approached me, and obviously I was earning a living from my consultancy business, and they made me an offer to pay me a stipend, basically, which is a lot less than what I was earning, a lot less. And that's why it's difficult for one's family, because I now earn a lot less, so there's less disposable income for my wife. I travel a lot. I do like 10 to 12,000 kilometers a month, and petrol's expensive. But I'm not a conscript. I volunteered for this position. I could have said no to Herman. I could have said no. You can't afford me, or I'm not interested. But I said yes. So I made that decision. That's my bed. I made it. I'm sleeping in it, and I'm happy to do that.
Is anyone taking over your business now whilst you're out, or have you shut it down now?
My business was based on me. It was Athol Trollip Consulting, so I've shut it down. I don't have time for that. But it did give me, some kind of encouragement that I could start it again if I wanted to. But I know that I can start something again. When I'm out of politics, I can start something again. And I think, to go back to your original question, entrepreneurs will fail. Young entrepreneurs are going to fail. I don't know of one successful entrepreneur who became successful first time round.
Yeah.
They're going to fail. But if you do something and you succeed and you get halfway there and you fail, at least you've got the courage to know I can do it again.
I almost said Herman Mashaba, but I don't know his story enough.
Yeah, look, his story was incredible. And what I learned from his story was that he was trying to do it alone, but then he realized that if he got other people to come in with him, that it could be better. And then he built an empire because he took other people with him. And he said in his talks and in his book that his business was at its weakest when he was running it solely by himself, and at its strongest when he surrounded himself with strong people.
That's amazing.
And I think politics is like that too, where you have political leaders who love all these mbongis around them, and they think they're living in an echo chamber.
Bongis.
Yes, and that was one of Thabo Mbeki's failings, is that he didn't want to hear from other people. He wanted an echo chamber and wanted mbongis around him. And I don't think that makes you strong, that makes you weak. You need many other voices and opinions to help you form a proper opinion if you want to be a real leader.
No, definitely. Let's look at Athol Trollip as Athol Trollip the man. I'm a big student of leadership. I love studying all types of leaders, political, business. What are some of your leadership habits? There must be things that you do that contribute to the person, or that have contributed to the person that you are.
Okay, so even as a young boy at school, I was always a leader. You know, I don't want to say I was a natural born leader, but I was an instinctive leader. I would take the lead. I wasn't scared to lead. I was a leader in most of the school sports that I played in. I was a leader at school. I was a deputy prefect.
Did you play rugby?
I played rugby. I was the
Position?
captain of the first team. I played primarily flank, but I played eighth man as well.
Oh, nice.
And I played water polo, and I did surf lifesaving, and I got honours for surf lifesaving and rugby at school. So leadership was something that came easily to me, and I embraced it. I love history. I read a lot of history. And I have two people that I admire most in political history. Abraham Lincoln, who was the president of America during the Civil War, which is probably the most difficult time to be a president of a country when it's tearing itself apart. And Winston Churchill, they're my two real heroes in politics. And there's a book written about Abraham Lincoln and what defined his success as a president. It's called A Team of Rivals, where he had a nomination contest in the Republican Party to be the president, and there were much more fancied candidates, at least four of them, Chase and Bates and Seward. There were at least four that everyone thought were going to win, and not Abraham Lincoln, but he won the nomination because I think Americans saw an authenticity in the man. He wasn't like a groomed politician. He was just authentic. And that resonated with me, and he became the president. But instead of chucking those people out, he put them all in his cabinet. So he had his enemies in his cabinet with him. And that's why it's called A Team of Rivals, and he was very successful. And what inspired me about Churchill was that Churchill won the war for Britain and for the Allied nations. And then the British people rejected him as Prime Minister. And then he came back again a while later as Prime Minister. And that inspired me because it just shows that you can be the hero and then become the villain. But if you stay true to yourself and don't change anything, you can become a hero again. Politicians that are like weather vanes, they want to be everything to everybody. Let's say one thing today and do something different the next day. Or malema abba. They'll never be heroes because they're just like a weather vane. They flip-flop one day to the next by a chincha. So I don't want to be like that. So I read history and I'm inspired by people who are consistent. I've been called a bully. I've been called all sorts of things like that. But I know that I've had people working for me that have said they'd... My ex-wife even used to say she'd rather work for me than be married to me.
That's harsh.
I'm very loyal to the people who work for me, and I'm very loyal to my political colleagues. I think loyalty is a huge issue in leadership, but I also don't countenance lack of accountability. I hold people to account, and sometimes that's why they say I'm a bully. But if you put your hand up to lead, you must lead and you must be accountable. And if you can't be accountable, you must go somewhere else.
Yeah. In terms of leadership habits, what are some of the things that you do on a weekly, on a monthly basis, on a daily basis? For instance, you just said that you read a lot, so that could be one leadership habit that you have. What are some of those practical things? I'm asking this because there are so many young people that might be interested in going into politics and that are in universities and schools that might want to become like Athol Trollip. So what are those things that a normal person can do that you do that make you or contribute to the type of person that you are today?
Look,
besides the reading.
I think there are 1,000 books that you could read about leadership, and they all have different ideas and different styles. One of my greatest strengths, I believe, in my leadership style, and it's also one of the greatest weaknesses, is that I like to lead by example. I like to do things and inspire other people to do it because I do it. Now, the weakness about that is that you're only one person. And often you're doing work that other people should and could be doing. So I've just chosen that that's who I am. That's what defines my leadership. I'm a doer. I'm not a talker. So I like to do things. I also think that planning is hugely important.
Okay.
I've got to plan my life. I've got to plan my day. I've got to plan everything. Like meeting you here today, you said 12
Wasn't
o'clock.
part of the plan?
No, it was. No, not
But
here.
but
you and I had made an appointment,
Yes,
12
yes,
o'clock,
yes.
and you arrived there 10 to 12. You were ready. You were setting up.
Yeah.
I love that because I made a commitment to my wife. I said, I'm going to leave here. I'm going to be back home as soon as possible because of what I've just told you about the circumstances. And then you had a problem and you said, well, look, I can't do the interview. And then you went to the trouble of setting this up here in the middle of the street. And I made a decision. And that's another thing about you must make decisions. And you must take the responsibility and consequences of those decisions. So I'll bear to a car.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's worth it. Because I made a decision. I said, this call, I'm not missing this opportunity of doing a street interview in Motherwell.
Yeah.
Here next to the pallet doctor where that young man's life was taken. I said, so it's about planning. It's about being able to adapt. It's about making decisions and standing by those decisions. Doesn't matter what the consequences are. I knew that when I fired Bobani, it was on the coup. But my primary promise to the people of Nelson Mandela Bay was I would stop corruption. So
what was he doing?
Oh, he was tender manipulating. There's a couple of forensic reports that have come out. Even his estate has now been frozen because of the forensic reports that have come out about Milongani Eco Consulting that I told Holomisa about.
And what did
Holomisa refused to do anything about it. So,
maybe he was just waiting for, like how most political parties do it. In fact, South African law, proven, is it? Innocent until
proven guilty. Let me tell you, Holomisa made his name as a anti-corruption crusader or buster. He lost that with me. I have no respect for that man anymore. He knew what Bobani was up to. And in fact, when I told him what I knew about what Bobani was doing, in the face, he went white. And from that day on, he started calling me a boss. Started having this racial inclination towards me. So I knew that he knew. But that's fine. I made a commitment that I was going to stop corruption. I could not countenance corruption from my deputy mayor, because then I would have become the hypocrite.
Yeah.
So if it cost me my position, I'm sad. I'm sad for the people of Nelson Mandela Bay because PE was changing. It was changing quickly. And then it went backwards under Bobani, and then Lungisa and Bobani, and then a deputy mayor for a whole year, and now Eugene Johnson, but she's been replaced, so hopefully it can pick up again.
I was just about to ask, so what do you think of the new mayor?
Well, I know Retief Odendaal reasonably well because he served on my mayoral committee. Very sharp guy. He ran our finances for us, and when he was the mayoral committee member for Treasury, our collection rate was the highest it had ever been. He managed our finances extremely well. He's an attorney by trade, so he's a bright guy. I think he's going to have a difficult ride. I don't think it's going to be an easy coalition in the beginning, but as I said, those parties that are now cooperating with him have realized that their option to cooperate with the ANC was going to be very short-lived for them. So I think they might be more committed to this coalition, but they're a difficult bunch. I mean, some of those people that are in that coalition are very fickle, and they'll change their mind at the slightest inclination, provocation, or even inducement. They'll change their mind.
What do you think about Oscar Mabuyan?
Oh, I've really given up with Oscar Mabuyane and Cyril Ramaphosa. I really have given up with both those people. They've had all the opportunity in the world to fix South Africa. Oscar Maimane has got, I think, the biggest percentage support of all ANC premiers. Cyril Ramaphosa went through that period of Ramaphoria where everyone said he had a long game and he was going to fix South Africa. He called Zuma's years 9 wasted years. Well, he's had 5 wasted years and they're still wasting away every single day. We want to get rid of those people. We want to get rid of the Oscar Maimanes and the Cyril Ramaphosas of this world. And or Ace Abba, even worse. They must go. Or Willem Kies, Abba Lamasela, they must all go.
ActionSA, I think I had a nice conversation with some of your youth leaders. I've seen that you guys have elected, I don't know, what is it called?
The Youth Advisory
League?
Council.
Oh, Youth Advisory Council. And I think the party's picking up a bit. So what are you hoping to do with ActionSA in the next 2 years? Because 2 years is not a long time. It's not a lot of time to...
So look, I think that's a good note to end off on. First of all, membership to ActionSA is free. And it's lifelong. So you sign up once, you're a member for life, unless you resign. Okay? So we won't have to go through credentials and throw chairs at each other at conferences and have huge fights about who can vote and who can't vote. We also have one membership. So women, we have a women's forum, we have a people with disabilities forum, and we have a youth forum.
Different.
And they all belong to the same membership. They're not separate organizations.
Okay.
Even the student forum, students at university, they are one member. They have one membership, ActionSA membership. So what we want to achieve here in the Eastern Cape over the next 2 years is we want to go to an elective conference within 3 months of the election. We're not having a conference before the election because we're a brand new organization. We've got to build a foundation. You can't put a roof on something that we haven't got a foundation. So we're building a foundation. And also we don't want to be infiltrated by people who want to destabilize us on the eve of the election. So we are building this foundation with our own people, with our own hands. And so we want to have an elective conference 3 months after the election, and we need to have 70% of the branches in this province launched by then. So my objective is to launch 70% of all the branches in this province, 100% in the metros, 90% in the small platteland towns, and then in the rural areas, if we can get to 60%, it's much more difficult, but we will get there. So across the board, we want 70%. And then we want to be the second biggest party in the Eastern Cape after the election in 2024.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Trollip. My final question for you before I let you go is, what's your message to South Africans that will be watching this?
Well, my message on Heritage Day to South Africa's first is to say Heritage Day isn't just about wearing headgear and Springbok rugby jerseys and traditional clothes and having a braaivleis and eating olusu like I've just done now.
Yeah.
It's about much more.
Oh, you had olusu. That's nice.
Yeah. It's about much more than that. It's about paying tribute to our forefathers who have left us this legacy and this heritage, and taking the responsibility of ensuring that the next generations, like your son and my son's children, that they have a better legacy than what they've inherited. So that's what we should be doing about, reflecting on that today. And that's what ActionSA wants to do. We want to be part of South Africa and a party in South Africa that is part of fixing the problems, not pointing at coming with solutions, not pointing at problems. That's what we want to be. We want to be a party of solutions, not criticizing and pointing fingers at problems.
Wow. Mr. Trollip, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for...
My name is Athol. Mr. Trollip is my late grandfather.
I'm being respectful.
No.
Okay, Athol, thank you so much for your time. And to your lovely family as well for allowing you to just sit down and chat to us.
Thank you to you and your lovely family for being here. And listen, I want to tell you, you're a resourceful man. And if I was employing somebody in a company, I'd employ you if you want to be an employee. But to do this, it's hectic.
No, thanks a lot. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.